When you ask Trump supporters to give you one word that they believe describes him, very often you will hear the word winner. To be honest, this should not come as a surprise. After all, Trump has spent most of his life building an image of himself. That image being that he is constantly winning and that he wins at everything he does. When his supporters look at him, they see success, fame, fortune, power, charisma, and perhaps even an aura of invincibility. There is no doubting that this image has always been the appeal of Trump. It is what draws people toward him. However, just how much of this image is actual substance, and how much of it is merely a facade? In other words, is this image of Trump based in reality? Or is this image mostly a fabrication? Trump has always claimed that he is an entirely self-made billionaire, and that he started with a mere $1 million loan from his father and turned it into a sprawling empire. However, is this story actually true? A 2018 New York Times investigation into Trump's past has uncovered some inconvenient facts regarding Donald's financial relationship with his father, Fred Trump. As it turns out, Donald did not just receive a $1 million loan from his father, but actually received a grand total of $413 million from his father's estate over the course of his life. Not in loans, but in gifts. Furthermore, these wealth transfers were made as part of a strategy to reduce the family's taxes. The legality of this tax reduction strategy is not clear. Some tax experts believe the strategy was downright fraudulent. Trump touts himself as a lifelong successful businessman, but just how true is this claim? Perhaps the grandiose image he has painted of himself becomes somewhat dubious when you take into account that, on 6 separate occasions, a Trump-owned business filed for bankruptcy. Furthermore, the so-called Trump University was found guilty of fraudulent advertising and sales tactics, and the highly controversial Trump Foundation was rampantly used by the Trump family for their own benefit. But perhaps the most striking of Trump's business failures was his ownership of the Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City. He acquired the casino in November 1988, financing the purchasing and completion of the casino through junk bonds. In April 1990, pop music megastar Michael Jackson was invited to the grand opening of the Trump Taj Mahal, which was meant to be a celebration not only of the opening of the casino, but of a new era for Atlantic City, an era of long-lasting prosperity and economic strength. During this time, many people were lured by Donald Trump and his aura of financial success, believing that by doing business in Atlantic City and investing their savings there, they would not only reap significant returns, but would be set up for long-term financial success. These people believed in Donald Trump. These people went all in on Donald Trump. And what happened? They ended up getting burned. Badly. Hard times hit Atlantic City. The initial buzz and economic surge that the Trump Taj Mahal had brought to the city had worn off. Within just the first 3 months of the opening of the Taj, it had lost an estimated $14 million. By July 1991, the casino had slipped into a debt situation that had become so urgent that bankruptcy was its only option. This, along with 2 other bankruptcies the following year, had allowed Trump to escape a total of $750 million in personal debt. In 1996, Trump used his publicly traded company, Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts, to transfer ownership of the Taj Mahal and another casino, along with the massive debts they carried, from himself to shareholders. That company would go on to file for bankruptcy in 2004 and again in 2009. The company's stock price, once at $35, eventually plummeted to just 17 cents. Trump made it out of all this just fine, but his investors took the brunt of the losses. A cautionary tale, perhaps, for the future of America. Despite his ongoing platitudes and Twitter rants, Trump hasn't done anywhere near as much winning in recent years as he would have you believe. Just take a look at his approach to healthcare. Trump often made mention of the fact that he planned to repeal and replace Obamacare, promising to do a, quote, good job and to bring amazing healthcare to America. However, his so-called plan to replace Obamacare wasn't much of a plan at all. His solution, quote unquote, to fixing healthcare was to throw people with pre-existing conditions into expensive high-risk pools and deny them access to affordable care. His healthcare bill was ultimately defeated in the Senate. Winning on healthcare? Not so much. What about the NAFTA negotiations? Did Trump really score some major victory for American dairy exporters? Again, the devil is in the details. The newly negotiated USMCA actually only increased American access to the Canadian dairy market by a very tiny margin, roughly 1/3 of 1 percentage point over the previous market access negotiated by the Obama administration. Despite the fact that the adjustment represents an almost negligible increase in U.S. dairy exports, Trump didn't hesitate to boast about how he supposedly scored a major victory for American dairy farmers. Once again, Trump made a mountain out of a molehill to make himself out to be some sort of winner. Trump often brags about winning the 2016 presidential election, but doesn't offer any specifics as to why anyone should view that win as impressive. After all, who was this brilliant, formidable, superstar opponent that he defeated?
We came, we saw, he died.
Then we ought to take him out.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, we're
That's a
working
Republican.
hard. We're working hard.
I said at the end of the day may be next year. It will be next year.
I have been often to, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. So this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered.
So you've received millions of dollars in contributions and speaking fees from Wall Street companies. How do you convince voters that you're going to level the playing field when you're indebted to some of its biggest players?
I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is.
I've never seen a candidate invoke 9/11 to justify millions of Wall Street donations until now.
What about our traffic problem?
9/11.
That's right. Trump's opponent in the presidential election was someone who had so much baggage and such an extensive past of scandals and controversies that it's a wonder how she ever got the Democratic nomination in the first place. Oh wait, we actually do know how she got the nomination. It was thanks to a combination of freebie superdelegates and a concerted, secretive effort by the DNC to ensure that her main rival, Bernie Sanders, could not win. Between the DNC scandal, the private email server scandal, the Clinton Foundation scandal, the Goldman Sachs paid speeches, the Benghazi controversy, her health scare during the campaign, and her husband's sex scandal and other scandals during his presidency, where she defended him every step of the way, it's clear that this person was downright unelectable by any reasonable standard. To make matters worse for Clinton leading up to the election, she was named by James Comey as part of an FBI investigation, and her name was not cleared from that investigation until just 3 days before Election Day. Trump had all of this going for him, yet he still lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, and only won the presidency due to winning a few swing states by razor-thin margins. Instead of trying to blame non-existent voter fraud for his loss in the popular vote, he should instead just own up to the fact that the majority of voting Americans do not want him to be president. As further evidenced by the blue wave which took over the House of Representatives in 2018, and that he only beat an extremely weak opponent in 2016 due to a deluge of extenuating circumstances and an anti-democratic electoral college system. On the international front, Trump hasn't been much of a winner either. In his first 2 years as president, Trump has uttered rhetoric, both in person and on Twitter, which has damaged America's traditional alliances, increased international tensions and frustrations, undermined and even jeopardized NATO, thereby making the world a less stable and less safe place. Furthermore, he has sparked tariff wars with both Canada and China, scrapped the Iran nuclear deal, hastily fled the negotiation table with North Korea, has considered Jerusalem, not Tel Aviv, to be the capital of Israel, and has given the Saudi crown prince a free pass on the Khashoggi murder. All of these things are having a cumulative, degrading effect on not only how the world views America, but also how the world interacts with America. Is this what a winner does? Undermining decades of international diplomacy and relationship building? Resorting to isolationist attitudes and policies that would stoke worldwide animosity toward America, and ultimately may make America weaker and less safe in the long run? No, that is not what a winner does. Time and time again, we see that Trump's worst attribute becomes very overt and out in the open for everyone to see when he isn't winning, when he isn't getting his way. As the longest government shutdown in American history showed, Trump is often willing to do whatever it takes to try and get his way, regardless of what the consequences are for the American people, or how much harm and suffering he causes for the world around him. That 35-day shutdown left some 800,000 public workers without a paycheck, placing them in financial peril. During this time, they were forced to continue working without pay in order to keep their jobs. Notably, that shutdown did not result in Trump getting the border wall funding from Congress that he was hoping for. Actually, the offer he received from the House was smaller after the shutdown than it was before it. Trump even had the audacity to publicly trash the late John McCain, even after the senator had passed away. It appears that once Trump begins a Twitter feud with someone, he can't seem to let it go. Ever. When discussing the American economy, Trump has spent much of his time self-aggrandizing and trying to distract you with GDP numbers and unemployment rates. He has done this for a very specific reason, it is because he does not want you to gain a full understanding of the situation. He does not want you to see the full picture. He merely wants you to focus all your attention to the small piece of the puzzle which makes him look great. However, the more you pan your eyes away from that small piece and you begin to acknowledge all the circumstances within which the current economic situation has come to be, the more you begin to realize just how different the situation really is from what Trump makes it out to be. So then, let's take a look at the facts that Trump does not want you to pay attention to. First of all, the Republican tax cut bill reduced taxes mostly for corporations. As a result, the national budget deficit has increased dramatically. The 2017 budget, the final budget tabled by the Obama administration, called for a $503 billion deficit, but the actual deficit jumped to $665 billion under Trump's watch. The 2018 budget called for a $440 billion deficit, but it ballooned to a whopping $779 billion. In all, the national debt is forecasted to increase by an extra $4 trillion by 2021 under Trump's plan, as compared to what it would have been if Obama's policies continued uninterrupted. Speaking of Obama, more jobs were actually created in the U.S. in the final 21 months of his administration than were created in the first 21 months of the Trump administration. There are yet more dark sides to Trump's economic strategy that he has not made any mention of. Environmental regulations have been ransacked by his administration. In all, 78 environmental rules that were in place at the time of him taking office have since either been abolished or are in the process of being rolled back. Everything from air quality to water quality and security to wildlife habitat are under threat by these changes. While it's true that allowing companies to pollute with near impunity causes them to save money, it ultimately threatens the long-term health and safety of not only Americans, but also the entire human species and all life on this planet in general. Also worth mentioning, for most American workers, wages have been stagnant these past 2 years when inflation is taken into account. Furthermore, benefits for many Americans have been recently curtailed, meaning these Americans have to add more drudgery to their lives just to receive the same amount of money they were receiving before. In other words, just to make ends meet. But perhaps the most unsettling consequence of Trump's economic plan is the most insidious. Most people aren't aware of all the details and the far-reaching consequences of the Republican tax bill, but they really ought to be. The bill passed in 2017 not only made direct tax cuts to companies, but also changed various tax rules. Most notably, rules regarding asset depreciation were changed dramatically. The rule used to be that companies had to write off the value of their assets as expenses gradually over the expected lifespan of those assets. However, the new rules allow companies to expense the entire value of their capital assets in the year in which they were purchased. This introduced a brand new incentive structure for companies, as they now could use the rule to sharply decrease their taxes by making large immediate capital purchases and then subtracting the value of those purchases from their taxable income. This incentive structure resulted in companies taking out large loans to make capital investments, knowing that by doing so, they can essentially enjoy a major tax break in the immediate year. But herein lies the deception. While it's true that changing the tax law in this way does create an immediate surge in economic activity and does increase GDP and decrease unemployment rates in the short term, one only has to think through the situation to see what the long-term consequences are likely to be. companies have taken out loans to buy those capital assets, so they will have to service the debt over a number of years. This will cut into future profits. Furthermore, these companies will not be able to write off any depreciation of assets in future years for any assets they bought in the current year. This, too, will lead to a higher tax burden for companies in the long run, since they already reaped all the tax relief in year one. What will this mean for the economy? Logically, it means that the economy will begin to slump, will continue to slump further as time goes on, and the ballooning national debt will continue to balloon even further out of control. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the inconvenient truth regarding Trump's apparent successful economic approach. It was, by design, meant to cause a short-term stimulation of GDP growth, stock market gains, and reduced unemployment rates. However, these ends were achieved in the most brazen, obnoxious way possible, as it meant laying waste to the environment, giving tax breaks to corporations and wealthy people while wages remained stagnant for the majority of American workers, and ballooning the national debt with no regard for how it will affect future generations of Americans. You see, this was Trump's plan all along. His tax cut bill was a Trojan horse designed specifically to make him look good, to make the economy seem strong for a few years, while pulling the wool over the eyes of the American people regarding the long-term consequences. Simply put, it was designed to get him elected to a second term. The question now is, will America keep holding on to this ticking time bomb? Or will they vote it out of office and change course before it is too late?